Hi, it's Bumble. Welcome back to my channel. So, even though this movie came out in theaters back in late November, I'm still gonna mark it as spoilers. I had literally just finished watching this like a couple minutes ago. Watched it with my parents, which actually wasn't too bad. Sometimes they talk about things and I always get a little hesitant with that, but like my dad was asking questions and my mom would answer them, so I didn't have to answer any questions, which is great because I was already so absorbed in the movie. I feel like that would have distracted me a little bit. I forgot when this had like come out in theaters. Like the movies in theaters I wanted to see this year was Frankenstein and Wicked Part 2, and I only got to see one of those in theaters. This one I think it kind of slipped under my radar. Like I knew that it was coming out and stuff, and I just completely forgot about it when it was in theaters, and then I kept seeing like the commercials for it and stuff, mostly like the Sesame Street one, and I was reminded of like, oh yeah, there's a third Knives Out movie. Which I kind of wish they weren't called Knives Out Mysteries anymore, because like the first one was called like Knives Out, but it never has the original cast except for Daniel Craig's character, LeBlanc. So I'm like, could it just be named after his character, because he's like the only recurring thing in these movies. Like the cast changes, the setting changes, these mysteries like don't have any like relation to each other, so it's funny to me it's still called like a Knives Out mystery when it's just like this one detective's adventures and stuff. Anyway, this movie just got added to Netflix. I have to make a clarification about something. You're gonna hear me in a video at the end of the year when I say like this is my final video of the year I recorded. That's what I thought, but then I watched this on Netflix and I'm posting this on the 13th, like the day I watched it, so this might be my last video I'm recording of the year, which isn't really that relevant to this, I guess. Or actually, no, it is. Because you're gonna see me make a ranking of like movies I watched over the year and stuff, and I'm just now like, damn, this could have been in there if I not made that yearly movie reflection video at the end. So I'm just saying, I hadn't watched this movie when I recorded my video talking about favorite movies of the years, but I will say now this is like this would have been like one of the contenders. I still feel good about what I had picked, but this was also really good, and I just wanted to add that in there. But yeah, since even though this has been in theaters for a bit, because it just got added to Netflix, and I'm assuming a lot of people are probably choosing to watch this on Netflix. I feel like ever since like post-COVID, people really aren't going into theaters. Me too, also because like the prices have been going up and stuff. Like I said, there was only like 2 movies in the whole year I was planning like I wanted to see in theaters, even though there was others like Predator Badlands I wanted to see. Still haven't gotten to see that yet, but yeah, I'm marking it as spoilers just because in case like people like me are watching it for the first time on Netflix, and I try with some of the reviews movies I get really excited about when they just come out. I mean I always spoil things, but I'll mark it in the title. I'm just saying do you have that like heads up, I'm gonna be spoiling things. I've watched the other Knives Out movies. I want to kind of talk about that a bit first. The first one, I really liked it. I didn't guess the murder or anything when I first watched it, but I feel like once it was explained and stuff, I feel like it made sense to me and I could follow through with it. I think I've only seen that movie like one time. It's pretty good though. I feel like I could watch it again, where it's more of like a classic murder mystery. I feel like with the setting and everything. And then the second movie, Glass Onion, I remember that coming out on like Netflix or something. It probably was in theaters too, I don't know. I didn't really like that one. I think because of the supporting cast of being like all of these like rich influencer people. I don't mean the actors, I mean the characters. I want to clarify that, where I wasn't really rooting for any of them. I was only rooting for like LeBlanc and his assistant, who's the character played by Janelle Monáe, and then I ended up watching parts of Glass Onion again only because of her, because like between the first time I watched it and the next time I watched the movie, I like discovered that she had like a music career and got like really into her music and stuff. So I was like, oh cool, she's in this movie, and it gave me a reason to watch. And I'd watched like bits and pieces, and I haven't seen it in a while, but I remember not really liking Glass Onion. So then I found out there was going to be a third one of these, and I was like, okay, we'll see how it goes. And before I'd watched the movie, I didn't like look anything up about it or whatever. I think I'd heard kind of floating on the internet that a lot of people seem to really like it. That made me kind of hopeful. I was like just on a phone call with my aunt, one of my aunts today, and she told me how I mentioned, I'm watching this movie on Netflix tonight, and she said that she really liked it. She's seen it in theaters, but she never really has like a negative opinion or anything, so I wasn't sure. I don't really take like people's movie advice if I've never actually talked to them about movies and understand like their tastes. People have different tastes. Anyway, so I went into that because of it, hearing those things, like kind of hopeful, and I actually really liked this. I don't know if it's like my favorite of the trilogy. It's been a bit since I've watched the first one. I think I'm gonna say for now, until I watch the first one, if I get like a more updated opinion on it, I'm gonna say this is my favorite of the trilogy. I actually don't mind if there's more of these two. I'm actually surprised there was even like 3 at all, but this one kind of made me more hopeful again about the series of like, okay, I just have a blast watching Daniel Craig's character and the more things that we learn about him throughout the movies. Like when I watched the original Knives Out, I thought it was just like a one and done thing of him being this detective and stuff, and then they kept making more and he kept showing up, and I'm like, oh, okay, he is like the main character of all of these. And the things we learn, like there's a part at the beginning of the movie when he meets, I guess more of like the actual main character of this movie is a priest who's named Judd, and LeBlanc is talking to him about like religion, and LeBlanc is saying about like how he doesn't believe in God and stuff, and he lists all these things that like the church does, and I do feel is like true and everything. And I was thinking like, oh, is that his only reason? Maybe. But then I remembered how in I think it's Glass Onion where we get to meet Blanc's ex-husband, the one who I think is played by Hugh Grant, and I was thinking like, oh, okay, that's probably like another reason you don't want to be in this building and stuff. So it's stuff like that where it's like the movie's plots, you know, and like characters aren't really connected, but throughout each movie we learn more about this southern detective dude, and I think that's cool how it like things kind of carry over about him. We learn more and more, but yeah, he's fun to watch. It's kind of funny, you know, like I was used to Daniel Craig as James Bond. I'm a James Bond. Oh yeah, I want to mention about that. Speaking of Bond, I was gonna say I'm a James Bond fan. Oh gosh, what's his name? I have to like squint at the poster. I can barely read it. Is his name on here? It's not on the poster. Okay. The priest that, oh gosh, why am I not remembering the actor? Jeffrey Wright, yeah, he's in this movie. There's a part where he has a very brief part that's at like the beginning and the end where he's this priest. His character's kind of funny because he like curses a little bit, and I was surprised by that, but he appears at the beginning and the end. He's the one that like kind of sends Judd on his mission of like, hey, you're gonna go to this church and you're gonna have to work with this other priest who runs it, who's played by Josh Brolin. And then at the end, Jeffrey Wright's character shows up again, and there's this one shot where he's standing next to Daniel Craig's character, and it made me a little sad because they're both in the Bond movies where their characters are friends. So I was thinking about that. But anyway, yeah, Daniel Craig, I was so used to him as James Bond in the Bond movies, especially because I got to the Bond movies like kind of, by the time I got into them, I think at least like 3 or 4 of his Bond movies were out. But I was so used to him as Bond and stuff. And then watching that, the first Knives Out was crazy, where I'm like, why is he talking with a southern accent, like an American like southern accent, and it like threw me off the whole movie, and I feel like I couldn't really focus very well. I don't remember how I felt with Glass Onion. Like I'm always almost a little startled to hear it because it, you know, it's not like the way he normally talks, it's just like for this one character. But then as I was watching this one, I got completely fine with it. It's funny, you know, like when you have people that play Bonds, even if they'll go, you know, there's like 6 actors that have played Bond, Um, I'm like checking in my head to make sure I got that right. Hold on, let me see. Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's 6. Anyway, you get so used to him as Bond, and it's like that for like any series too, not just like with James Bond. And then they branch out to do other stuff after they're done playing that character. And but I always think like, oh, but even when I see Pierce Bronson, he's in like a billion things now. Now he's like an older guy. And Daniel Craig's kind of going down that route too, where I always think like he's just James Bond, he's in like an undercover mission or whatever. But I think I can say with Daniel Craig that I finally have another character I can see him as, where I don't look at him in this movie and I think like James Bond. I'm like, no, he's the detective that's been in this whole like trilogy and everything. And I think that's kind of impressive that I can like that he's so like in character as this character that I don't think of like, oh yeah, he's like Daniel Craig, he's James Bond. I'm just so focused as like him as LeBlanc and everything, and that's pretty nice. I don't know where I was going with that point. I wanted to mention about that. I was like so focused on like his performance and everything, but he is great in like all of these. His character is really fun to watch. Like one of the things we learn about him in this is that he's a fan of musicals. We get 2 examples of that, and I got really excited by both. There's a part when he's in the car and he puts some music on because he's trying to have a private conversation with Judd to prevent him from getting turned into the police. And this is like a while into the movie, and it's the Railway Cats song from the musical Cats that like blasts through on his cassette. And my dad, and it's very brief too, my dad loudly said at that point of like, what the heck is that? And I was like, oh, it's from a musical. And it was like, whatever, and we continue with the movie, but I was just thinking about that. That's also my favorite song from that musical. So that was nice. That was like a nice little thing. And then when LeBlanc is gonna do his like big final reveal at the church, it's not really like the final reveal. He's just trying to like get the villain to like confess and stuff. Actually, I feel weird calling her a villain. I mean, it's like technically right, she did kill people, but we'll get into Martha in a bit, in a while. Anyway, he's doing his big like, I'm the detective, I'm gonna reveal all the facts and whatever thing, and everyone's arguing in the church, and I saw it on the subtitle thing before it actually played, and I was just like, oh, because he plays the opening notes for the overture from Phantom of the Opera, and he plays it on this big church organ to get their attention. I got so excited. I was like, yes, and then the movie continued and all that. But no, that was one of the things I wanted to try to remember really hard as I was watching the movie, of like, okay, I want to mention about that briefly. In the movie, I want to kind of talk about the characters, but more before I talk about the plot and like how I felt about it and stuff. I feel like that's kind of more that's like easier for me to kind of get out of the way first, and more that I'll have to talk about. But yeah, we learn stuff like that. Speaking of that scene, there's a part when there's like sun that shines through this light that shines on LeBlanc as he's like talking, and I actually laughed at that because I'm like, no, that's like way too convenient. And the characters ask him, I'm like, oh, have you had a revelation? Are you like believing now? Are you finding like faith in Christ? And LeBlanc's just like, no. It's that he was like figuring out something else. It was that he was having faith instead in Judd, which I found that kind of funny, just the way he responds. But his friendship that he develops with Judd, I think, is one of like the strongest things about the movie, because he's had like multiple companions, and this is why I wish I could freaking remember Glass Onion. So as I'm like going through these comparisons, because like in the first movie, it's him and Ana de Armas's character Martha were the entire movie, and this movie, if anything, it kind of reminds me of like of the first movie. In my brain, I feel like I kind of just forget that Glass Onion exists. but yeah, he's with Martha, and it always does seem like in these movies, I find it interesting, like LeBlanc is the detective, he's like the tying thing between all of these, but the real main character is always whoever is like his companion, like his Watson and to Sherlock or whatever. I don't know, I've never read Sherlock. But yeah, in the first one it's Martha, and Martha has blood on her shoe, and the entire movie Martha thinks that she might have committed the murder, and then at the end LeBlanc reveals to her of like, no, you didn't do anything bad, you were being a good nurse, and that he had noticed the blood on her shoe, but also her thing of like she physically can't lie, it will like cause her to throw up, and he's known the whole time that she's been innocent but doesn't tell her, and then reveals who the actual murderer is instead, and that's like one of the big things of the movie. And this one's actually like a little similar except instead of like, you know, him thinking she's innocent, she doesn't think she's innocent, whatever. With this one it's more of like, I mean, you do have Judd where he tells LeBlanc that he's like innocent and stuff, but then throughout the movie does stuff where you're like made to believe of like, oh, Judd actually is the murderer, and then it's like, wait, no, he's not, and it just kind of flip flops for a while where he keeps being like set up with things. And I do find it interesting that and it is kind of like the first movie as well, where you're following around like Judd or Martha and like what their lives are. They have to like introduce all the potential suspects and everything, and then LeBlanc finally shows up, to the point where like with this one it's like I was so focused on following Judd as the main character, I had like completely forgot that LeBlanc is supposed to show up at some point in the story. And it doesn't feel like, you know, like LeBlanc shows up and it's like, oh, okay, the story's finally starting and whatever, and Judd's not going to be the main character. It kind of just feels like we're following along with Judd's story, LeBlanc shows up, and then it just like kind of continues to be like Judd's story, like he's just the main character like the whole time. I don't know if that makes sense. But yeah, their friendship throughout this is interesting, where it's like the police, oh yeah, there's a policewoman, she's played by Mila Kunis. I don't remember what the character's name is, so I'm gonna just refer to her as the policewoman. She's like the, not really like the third main character. I thought she was gonna be like a trio, if anything. I thought it was gonna be like the detective, the police officer, and the priest, and instead it's actually just the priest and the detective, and every once in a while the police officer shows up and stuff. But yeah, Mila Kunis's character is like constantly thinking like, oh, it's the priest, and like everyone else thinks it, well, I shouldn't refer to Judd as the priest, there's multiple priests in this movie, but everyone thinks it's like Judd a lot of the time, and then you keep finding things and showing stuff of like, okay, maybe it is Judd, and it like flip-flops throughout the entire movie. Well, actually, no, I was going to say that LeBlanc believes in him, but no, because LeBlanc reveals to multiple characters of like, yeah, I know it's Judd, and you have this whole thing of like, oh, he's, you know, he's been hanging around with the murderer the whole time or whatever, and then it turns out actually that none of it is Judd, and it's actually other people, because it's a whole thing of like, oh, there's actually multiple murders, which I think Glass Onion had that too. I don't completely remember. There's, okay, let me see, because it's kind of like someone kills someone and then that person gets killed and it just keeps going. If I remember right, it's that the doctor, because the main murder they're like originally trying to solve is the priest character that's played by Josh Brolin, and that ends up being like a very small part once it's like finally revealed and stuff. And then the actual thing is who kills the person that kills that guy, and it continues from there, because the like the really mean priest is killed by the doctor, and then the doctor is the doctor kills the groundskeeper, and then the doctor is killed by the church secretary. So it's like a whole thing that continues, and the movie is kind of less about like finding who done it, even though it's like literally called a who done it on the poster, and more of like the why and how it was like executed. And I find that really interesting. Like that's in all these movies, and that's kind of more of like the fun part for me, where like you're given a whole list of like and I'll go back to talking about Judd later. I guess I'm just kind of on this ramble now of like suspects and stuff, and I find it funny that like not all the suspects are developed. Like that's one thing I kind of will maybe give more to like the first movie if I'm comparing the two. With that one, it's like it's a family. It's like a small family that are trying to get the fortune of like of this old guy who's like the head of the family and stuff. He's like the grandfather or whatever. I don't really remember. And it's about trying to get his fortune and stuff, and you feel like you kind of know the whole family as you're going through and stuff, and they're like all suspects. But with this movie, I feel like we didn't really get to know like all of the suspects. I mean, there's more things that are kind of kept in the background, but there's only really like the groundskeeper, the doctor, and the secretary, with the secretary being the most important and the doctor being kind of secondary, are the only ones we kind of, I feel like, really get to explore. Oh no, and one other person, the murdered priest's son, I think his name's like Sai or something, he also gets explored as well if you're trying to figure out like who his actual like parents are and everything. And then kind of everyone else, I feel like gets sort of pushed to the background. Like there's a character named Vera, who's this lawyer who had to raise who she thought was like her illegitimate brother, who turns out to be like the son of the priest who got murdered. Like I mentioned, it's like a whole thing to explore in like the middle of the movie. I thought she was going to be more relevant after that, especially because you kind of keep seeing her around where she suddenly, like towards the end of the movie, where she suddenly starts smoking, and she kind of seems like she doesn't really care about anything, and you see her talking to the secretary, and you think like, maybe she's involved with the murder somehow, but no, she's not. She's just turns out to be like kind of mean, actually. Or there's this I don't remember if she's a violin player or it's cello or something, this woman, and she's in a wheelchair and she's like constantly in pain, and she goes to this church to like try to find like the ability to heal, but it's less so a thing of like her physically being healed as in like a religious miracle, and it's more turns out to be a thing of like kind of finding the strength to get through the days, which she ends up with at like the end of the movie, because you get to see what happens to everybody. But I feel like she didn't really end up with much attention. Like she shows up in scenes where she's saying of like, I want to find out like the truth and stuff, but I feel like you don't really learn anything about her. She's kind of just there. Hold on, let me look back at the poster. Even the groundskeeper, like I mentioned, like he does turn out to be important. He is a crucial part of the sort of scheme that's happening that you find out at the end. But I feel like him as a person, you don't really learn much about or anything, except that he's in love with the secretary, Martha, and that's kind of about it. So there's like at least 3 characters in the terms of the suspects that you can kind of rule out pretty early on of like, okay, these probably aren't the murderers, but also you don't really learn anything about them. They're kind of just they are all important, like all the characters are important in the story and stuff in some way, but you know, it's kind of interesting, like some of them I feel like I had a full understanding of their character more than others, or in terms of like screen time really and stuff. But I understand. Also, this is like a 2.5 hour movie. I was actually surprised. I don't have a good attention span in general. I've always known that. It's been kind of getting worse as I continue through life and stuff. And usually 2.5 to like 3 hour movies I have a very hard time paying attention to. This one, I was not only like hooked the whole time of like wanting to see what happens next and continuing and stuff, I felt like it had really good pacing. I never felt as I was watching this like I was bored, or even like during some of the slower scenes in the movie, I felt like it had continuously at a fast pace, and I was actually focused like the whole time and everything, the whole like 2.5 hours, and that's like very rare for me. Even during Frankenstein, for example, which I enjoyed, and I was like so focused on trying to understand what was happening and absorbing it and stuff. But even through that one, I think my brain kind of did tend to wander occasionally and stuff. But with this one, I didn't. I was just so focused on like trying to figure out like the mystery and how they're revealing all these like plot twists and whatever. And I think that's kind of what kept me engaged. I will say, even though I was paying attention, I didn't really fully understand everything. I absolutely need another rewatch. I didn't really feel confused. It was more of like I'm trying to absorb it all as I'm like watching it for the first time and how I'm feeling towards things. But it was also there would be like a person I thought was the killer, and then it's like nope. And it was like less of me being confused about who the killers were, and I think more so of like the reasons why things were happening. Like towards the beginning of this movie, you learn like when Josh Brolin's character is introduced, that he has this family backstory of his mom, who's like referred to as like a harlot or something, and she's trying to find this diamond. You don't know that it's a diamond at this point. It's like revealed at the end, but I'm just kind of filling in the gaps here now. It's called the Eve's apple or something, and it's this diamond that her father had, I think, and he's like a priest who's trying to keep this one diamond out of like the hands of evil and stuff, and he ends up eating it, and then his daughter, I think her name's Grace, is like trying to find it, and Martha, who's the secretary, is like a little girl at the time. This is like a flashback, and when you originally see this happening in the story, it's that it's told as if Grace is in like a jealous demonic rage trying to destroy the church as like a heck you to her dad or whatever, but then in actuality it turns out she's trying to find this diamond. That's the thing I keep forgetting about, of like why she's trying to find it. Besides that it's worth money, the character's described as like it's her last chance of whatever. And then Martha, I probably should have pulled up the Wikipedia page for this. I feel like I'm getting things wrong, and I'm sorry about that. I'm just going off of memory. And then you see Martha, and she's like, I know where the diamond is, but I'm not gonna tell you. And then Grace tries to like strangle her and stuff, and is taken away and eventually dies. But then the whole thing is like throughout the entire, for like 60 years or whatever, Martha knows the location of this diamond, and then she decides she's gonna get it, but not for like monetary reasons. She's gonna like throw it away or whatever, because she knows that like the evil priest that got murdered at the beginning had wanted this diamond or something. He got greedy and wanted this like lust for power with this diamond, and Martha's like, nah, I've devoted my whole life to this church. I'm not gonna let you be greedy and ruin everything. So she has this plan, which involves like the town doctor and the groundskeeper that I think him and her, not the doctor, the groundskeeper and Martha, I think his name's Samson, they're like lovers or something, or at least it seems like they liked each other. I don't think they were like a couple or anything, and the three of them kind of work together to try to get this diamond and fake this whole like coming back from the dead thing and burying people who are still alive in caskets on purpose. It's this whole plan to like get the diamond, get out, get rid of it, whatever, and to create this whole miracle around this priest that everyone's going to think risen from the dead and kind of restore faith in the church sort of thing. And then it ends up going wrong because there's a double cross where the town doctor, the guy that's played by Jeremy Renner, who I feel like I haven't seen in like a movie in a while, honestly. I think because he's been doing like TV now. He's like one of the only actors I recognized in this. But anyway, he's the town doctor. He ends up trying to take the diamond, and then when trying to take the diamond, he kills the groundskeeper, who's kind of just really innocent in a lot of this, honestly. Like he was going along with the whole plan because he loved Martha, and I felt really bad for him. And he gets killed, and the town doctor tries to get the diamond, and then he confesses all this to Martha, and Martha's like, okay, cool, I switched the cups with the poison because you were going to kill me next and take the diamond, and now you're dead. And then she puts the doctor's body inside of in like green acid that kind of looks a little like Nickelodeon slime, but not really, I think just color-wise. And then Martha takes the diamond, and she's like telling the main Judd all of this, and right as she's like taken poison to die, and on purpose, and then gives up the diamonds at the end, and that's how the movie ends. I didn't mean to like speed run through that or anything. I was trying to get through it as I remembered. What I'm confused about with that, though, and I didn't even reveal everything with the murders, I still gotta talk about how Josh Brolin's character died, but that's like the thing that's actually surprisingly less important, even though that's like the murder they're trying to solve the whole movie. The doctor has like a bathtub thing in his basement, and there's a hose there that connects to the green acid or whatever. Why does the town doctor need spooky green acid? It looks less like Nickelodeon slime, and it looks more like the thinner from Epic Mickey, and it like functions the same too. Like, you see, there's this really cool reveal where you see the town doctor and this other person, and you think one of them's alive. They're like hanging over the bathtub, and then the acid is removed and it's eaten through the bones. It's like a little gnarly, but actually not too bad. And I'm like, and my dad asked it too, and I was like thinking about that the rest of the movie until I got to this point of like, why does the doctor have green acid? It's super convenient. It kills people. He dies in there and everything. Actually, part of the reason they're able to identify the doctor's skeleton really is because he's got his wedding ring. That's like his one indicator of like, yeah, that's the town doctor's. He has the wedding ring. He wants the money to win back his quote-unquote harpy wife that left him for another man or something. Yeah, basically everyone's motivated with this diamond just purely out of greed, really. Yeah, why does the doctor have Mickey Mouse paint thinner acid in his basement? That's I think one of the only questions I still have at the end of this movie, other than like, hey, it's convenient, it got rid of the body. But he wasn't planning to use that to kill Martha. He just poisoned her drink, and that was it, and she was gonna die painlessly. He wasn't gonna use the spooky green acid to kill anybody. Why is it there, Doc? I might have to try to Google that. Maybe it doesn't matter, but that was just something that bothered me. Okay, I want to go back to Judd. I think Judd was my favorite. I was originally talking about him and his friendship he develops with LeBlanc. How Judd... I like, even when he first meets LeBlanc, I especially like the two of them at the beginning, where Judd... as we're following along his story, he is confessing, I think in his church, like privately, he's like praying and stuff, because at this point everyone thinks that like he's the murderer and stuff, and then LeBlanc shows up, and Judd's crying and is like, hey, I didn't kill this guy, you have to believe me. And LeBlanc says this thing that kind of stayed with me throughout the whole movie of like, oh, you're not a guilty man that's pretending to be innocent. You're like an innocent man that's feeling guilty. And poor Judd really like goes through it throughout this whole movie. Like a lot of the time where he's described by characters, including like the police officer and detective, of like, hey, you've been awake for like 36 hours, you look like shit, you need to go sleep. And he eventually at one point actually does pass out, like sitting up, and my mom said something of like, how did he fall asleep in that position? I'm thinking like, duh, he was awake for that long. He's gonna pass out in the toilet if he needs to. But yeah, Judd is just really going through it throughout this movie. He like cries a couple times. His whole thing is that he just wants to do so much good. And I'm glad that LeBlanc, even though he's telling other characters of like, yeah, no, I know this guy's the murderer or whatever, because LeBlanc keeps kind of saying throughout the movie of like, this is an impossible case, but then he ends up solving it in any way, as like more clues kind of keep happening. He also like kind of lies to a couple people, or I guess less lying and more of like leaving out the truth. He like prevents Judd from like wrongly getting arrested when he's gonna turn himself in, and then he figures out what's happening and is like not really telling people things, the detective, But yeah, Judd, yeah, he just wants to do so much good. Like, they really set him up at the beginning of, like, establishing his character, where he has this backstory of, like, being a boxer. There's this whole thing, like, the reason he became a priest, partially, was he killed a guy in the ring, and it was a guy, he says, like, Judd saying, like, his own heart was, like, full of hatred when he did it and stuff. And he says something to LeBlanc later of like, oh yeah, there's like no running away from that. that he decides he wants to do some good. He becomes a priest. I've probably missing some details there, but that's okay. But it doesn't, I feel like it doesn't really matter in a sense of like how he became a priest. It's more of like he is a priest now, and he believes in wanting to help others and being a good person and trying to help them find salvation and stuff. But he knows, like, when he like meets Josh Brolin's character, besides, oh my gosh, I forgot about it, Josh Brolin's character, they do like a confession thing outside, and Josh Brolin's character keeps talking in like very graphic detail of like all the times and places he like masturbates or whatever, which was kind of funny at first. I'm glad it's like a very short thing at like the beginning of the movie, but I was just like, damn, dude. But yeah, he's not a good person. I mean, we find that out later too, when he, has the whole plan to like steal the diamond and stuff. But his sermons, I keep thinking about where he's like accusing people and yelling at them and stuff and kind of scaring them. He has this whole thing where he actually likes getting people to like walk out and everything. People even like flip him off and stuff. And then later on, and he has this like confrontation thing with Judd, where Judd's like, hey, you're not helping any of these people. And Judd is like listing out all the ways where they like actually need help. And then the two of them get in a fight, and then because of that, everyone thinks that, not like a physical fight, just like an argument, but everyone thinks that like Judd, eventually when Josh Brolin's character is killed, early in the movie, thinks like, oh yeah, Judd did it, he said these things about, what was it, like cutting you out like a cancer or whatever, blah 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 blah, which was just a thing he said in like a moment of anger. And the only reason the town kind of knows it is because there's a character named Sai that is recording like everything on his phone throughout the movie, and you think like, oh okay, that's going to be really helpful. And I mean, it partially is, but he's doing it in a way where it's like he's only getting the information he wants and not really like sticking around for the whole truth or whatever. But it does end up being really important for finding a lot of clues, and I feel like that was realistic. I mean, Sai's doing it because he's like a YouTuber and stuff, but this movie, I'm assuming, takes place when it came out, so I feel like it makes sense that like there's, and it is like a small town too, so I kind of get it of like people should be recording on their phones. I feel like that's like very realistic of like the real world and stuff. Anyway, and then Judd has a sermon. I don't remember if that's what it's called, like a sermon or I think so, like in his house, and it's like private, and you can tell the difference like night and day between like how he does it and how, like even with Josh Brolin's character, he stands at the pew, and the pew I think is shaped like a boat or something, which actually looked really cool, but he's like literally standing up higher and looking like down on everyone, even though that's like verbally also what he's doing, and he's preaching all this stuff about like power and stuff and making people feel bad, and like trying to scare them. And then with Judd's sermon, it's really chill. He's doing it out of, I don't remember if it was in a church, it looked like the inside of a house or something, but he talks very like warmly to them of wanting to teach them about like love, I think through Jesus or something, and just kind of turns it more into less of like a lecture and more of just like a conversation and trying to get these people to like confess things themselves if they want to. And a lot of them are really mean, they don't want to be around him and stuff, and this is like before anybody gets murdered, by the way, where they're like, no, we want to go back to the mean priest, and Judd's like, you guys are scared of him, why do you keep going there? But yeah, they don't really like Judd for pretty much any of the movie, really, except like Martha at the end, honestly. But yeah, I felt bad for Judd, but his sermon sounded like it would have been so nice. That would have been cool to go to, if just someone that's very like warm and friendly about it, but you don't need to feel like intimidated by anything. Because like the design of the church in this looks really cool, but it also just, with it being really huge and a lot of scenes in there are kind of dark, it just entirely depends. It's something that was interesting with the movie, of like when the light was coming in through, those big stained glass windows and stuff, because because I was really paying attention to light in this movie, especially in that church where sometimes it would just kind of get dark all of a sudden, and which is probably just the natural movement of the sun or whatever. But I always thought that was interesting. And then when Judd's at the house doing a sermon, it's like the middle of the day and the sun is shining, it's warm, and it made me think the church, the actual like physical building of it in this movie from the inside, just seems like kind of cold. It always seems like dark in there in those scenes. They don't ever turn on like a light or anything, and that doesn't really sound fun. I'm not saying like don't go into the building, it's like cold or whatever. I don't really go to like church or anything, but I do consider myself like somewhat religious. But I remember when I'd visit my grandma when she was still alive, and I'd go with her to church because like everyone would go with her when I'd like visit. And I remember walking in there, and I mean, this is just like me personally, and it felt kind of really calming being in there and stuff. And the characters do actually talk about that at the beginning of the movie, or not beginning, I should say, like when LeBlanc's introduced, he literally gets into like a conversation about that with Judd that I'm still kind of like thinking of a little bit. But yeah, Judd tries to do like a sermon at the beginning that doesn't go well, and then and he like doubts himself as like a priest and stuff. Like eventually he doesn't want to be a part of LeBlanc trying to solve everything, and calls him out on like, hey, you're just treating this whole thing as like a game or like a thing to win and a challenge and stuff, and not as like a person, you know, like got murdered and I need to be there for these people and stuff. You're like taking away from, I think he says to LeBlanc something of like, you're taking away my responsibility of being a priest or something, or taking me away from my purpose. And they get in this argument, and Judd actually leaves him, which I thought was like a really strong scene in the movie. And Judd eventually gets back on the case when he gets involved with stuff with like the doctor and the groundskeeper, and he gets blamed for a murder and stuff. Which, speaking of which, they have a scene in the woods, the doctor and the groundskeeper, and you can right before that happens, Judd is still arguing with LeBlanc, and you literally see in the background the groundskeeper with a lamp like walk out into like the forest or whatever. So it's interesting, like if you're paying attention, you can like notice things like that. I mean, it's like an obvious thing where you just see like a light in the distance. It's not like one of the things the movie tries to like hide from you. I don't think it really tries to like hide anything from you. It's more of like when things are revealed, and it's kind of like a, did you notice it though? Like there's this whole thing with this bar that's like themed around the devil or something, and it has these two lamps that have like a wolf thing on the top of them that ends up getting like broken or something. And they have this thing at the beginning towards the beginning of the movie where LeBlanc is showing Judd like a photo and comparing it to the bar, and he keeps lifting it up and down. He's like, did you notice the thing? Did you notice the thing? And the thing Judd's supposed to notice is a bag, but apparently what you're actually supposed to notice, and like the viewer, I mean, and they don't reveal it till the end, is that, and I think within that scene when you first see the building and stuff, I don't think you would probably notice it, but there's two lamps, they're identical, and they both have a broken thing on the top, which ends up being important to how the really mean priest gets murdered and stuff. And kind of the reveal of like, hey, there's like a whole plan that's like been going on in the background and stuff. But yeah, that's kind of interesting. That's why I need to rewatch this again, of like, now that I know who the murderers are and how things happen and why, and I can pay attention of like how many clues did they give you throughout the movie that you just, or maybe I'm saying you as in like a general sense, me, I probably didn't notice most of them, but of like how many things are there for you to like spot, and you know, of how quickly things are actually revealed if you're like paying attention and stuff. But one of the other scenes, you know, I'm talking about like on this ramble of like Judd and him as like a priest in this, at the end, like the very end, when Martha is dying in his arms and the characters don't even realize that she's dying, and she's doing this whole confession thing. And I actually really like that her confession, because it's like the big like killer's confession at the end of the whodunit movie and stuff, but it's framed as like she's confessing to Judd, and she's doing this willingly. It's not like a trick or anything, and she's basically explaining everything. And I actually liked in that scene, they got rid of all of the other, like, suspects, as I'll call them. Not that they would have cared anyway. But they get kicked out of the room. It's literally just, like, the policewoman, the detective, Judd, and Martha, and I think that's about it. So there's not even Cy in there recording any of this or whatever, which is good, because he ends up, like, pissed about some stuff. He's the person who, like, actually should have the diamond, but the characters keep it from him at the end because they know he's going to be, like, greedy with it and stuff. And I mean, it is, like, technically his inheritance, but he would have been, like, greedy with it. And I actually do like that the diamond at the end gets put into the new crucifix, and it's technically there in plain sight, like the crucifix, you know, with Jesus up there in his chest. I actually also like that it was made by Judd as well at the end of the movie, because he takes over being in charge of that church, and the part on the chest is, like, actually kind of cut open, but it's, like, designed like that, and then you get to see at the end that the diamond sparkles in it, so no one would notice. But I do like the whole symbolism of, you know, originally there's no crucifix. It relates to some stuff in, like, the backstory of the movie, of the backstory of, like, the church, and then which turns out to be, like, kind of wrong anyway, of how the characters are made to understand it. And then at the end, the new crucifix is built, and the diamond is put inside of like the heart of Jesus and stuff, because they have this line about, like, your inheritance is Jesus. It's said to one of the characters instead of, like, money, so it's like the diamond is put in there. I feel like it kind of relates to that, but also showing of, like, the diamond never really mattered anyway. The characters are, like, Judd doesn't care about, like, the monetary value of it or anything, and it was this thing that, like, everyone squabbled through for, like, years and years. And it was this, I think the mission of, like, the original priest from the church or something, of, like, keeping the diamond out of people's hands, out of, like, the wicked's hands or whatever. So now it's, like, no one knows where it is, but it's still there, and it's still kind of, it's, like, serving more as, like, a symbol than anything else. But anyway, Martha's in, like, Judd's arms, and she's, like, dying, and he releases her of all her sin, and then she opens her hand and the diamond comes out and stuff. Like, she was kind of just clinging onto it. It's, like, the very last moment, which I found kind of interesting. But yeah, I feel like it shows, like, he really is a good priest and everything. He's very unsure of himself throughout the whole movie. Even in that scene, he isn't sure of, like, what to do with Martha, and LeBlanc is like, you gotta take her confession, be the priest and stuff. But then as he's, like, gently talking to her as she's dying and stuff and releasing her of sin, I felt that was one of the, like, strongest parts of the movie, or one that I really like, that doesn't turn out to actually be, like, anything that's, like, plot relevant. I mean, the characters. There's a character named Luis that LeBlanc and Judd are trying to get information from, and it's kind of funny when they do finally get that information. It's later, and it's after a big reveal about something where the information becomes useless at that point in the story. But they're talking to her, and Luis is kind of talking and not really listening to what Judd's saying, and then he's trying to be polite, and he's trying to tell her something and to ask, like, the very important information, and then he's, like, gonna hang up or something, and then she starts crying, and she reveals about her mother. They got into an argument, the mother's in hospice, Luis feels really bad about it, and you can instantly see Judd's manner kind of, like, shift a bit, where at first he's, like, he's not, like, really listening to her at first when she's just babbling about, like, the business or whatever, but then, like, as soon as she mentions her mom, and he can tell she's, like, getting upset on the phone before she says what it is. I think he even says it. He says, like, oh, your mother's sick, huh? And she, like, continues from there. And then I like that at that point, like, as soon as that happens, Judd does not care about the mystery or the plot important information he's trying to get from this woman, or, like, anything else. Just in that moment, he, like, locks in of being the kindly priest that is going to hear her out and try to comfort her and everything. And she asks, like, hey, can you pray for me? And he actually goes into a separate room, closes the door. We don't hear his conversation because we're following LeBlanc at that point. And then it turns out that Judd had stayed with her on the phone. Their conversation starts in like the middle of the day, and by the time it's finished, there's like a storm outside. It's nighttime, so I'm presuming they talk for hours. And he tells her like, "Hey, you can call me at any time." And you do eventually see when he does pray later on that he does include her and her mother in there. And then Louise does call, where she's like, "Hey, you said I can call anytime," and she gives the plot important information, but it's like already too late at that point. But anyway, besides any plot relevancy with the character Louise, I thought that scene was really nice where Judd actually takes the time to hear her out. And it's also really nice too, because throughout the movie he's just trying to talk to people and do his job of like being a priest, and the people in the town, like the suspects and stuff, they're all like the regulars who go to the church anyway. There's like not really any new people. Like LeBlanc's, I guess, the newest person, but he's not interested in the church for like religious reasons or anything. So I feel like Judd kind of gives up hope of being a priest kind of throughout the movie, especially as these like murders are happening, or the murder I should say, and like trying to solve it. So it's kind of nice when he finally gets that like call from Louise, as they're talking and she gets upset and he's like getting to do his job, and it's to someone who's actually like seems like a good hearted person who is seeking that comfort, and he's probably like the best person to talk to about for it, Judd. And he just finally like connects with someone and is able to do some good. It's like a very small part of the movie, but it was like one of my favorite scenes because I just thought it was so nice. Okay, what else? I've been talking about this for like 15 minutes. I feel like there's only very few things I'm focusing on. The actual murder of Josh Brolin's character. I don't know why I'm like completely forgetting his name. They say it like constantly throughout the movie, and I just cannot remember anymore. I also just don't want to open Wikipedia at this point. I don't care. Josh Brolin, priest character, the guy that like masturbates and was trying to steal the diamond and stuff. The thing, they set up the murder as like it's an impossible murder to solve and stuff, that he goes into a small windowless room and no one sees him in there, and the thing is the door isn't even closed or anything, and then he is suddenly knocked over, he like falls over and there's blood on him. And at first LeBlanc thinks it's like they refer to it as like a knife throwing robot in the movie, but it's like a knife throwing device or a secret wall or all these like crazy things. And then actually turns out it was the town doctor, and that he I think did trigger something to look like fake blood or whatever, and so the characters go to investigate and they think he's dead, and the doctor's like, whoa, let me check out the guy. But what he actually does is he commits the murder right there. Like he gets a knife and stabs the guy, but it's like in a way where no one's able to notice, and then the guy like actually dies or something. And it was all kind of planned by the doctor too, where he gives like a poisoned thing in a flask that the priest, the Josh Brolin priest, always drinks or something, and that's what starts it of him falling over, and then eventually gets stabbed. And it ends up being like a unsolvable murder, and like the thing they're investigating throughout most of the movie ends up being a really small and easy thing. And like once it's actually revealed, it's like a small thing, and then the actual like big reveal and the real murders is stuff with like the groundskeeper and the whole plan with like the secretary and stuff. And the murder of that priest was like a small part of it actually. It's just that their plan goes askew because the doctor character messes things up in that he becomes greedy and kills someone over the diamond, and things kind of escalate from there. But yeah, that was almost kind of funny to me of like how little the Josh Brolin like murder, like once it actually happens, and that it's all part of like a greater scheme, and that's more of just like the first step of it rather than being like this is the main murder of the movie. But yeah, I find that kind of thing interesting in all of these movies. Like in the first movie, it's that there wasn't originally a murder, and then there was, of like this old guy who I think his name's Harlan, who like poisoned himself, but it's like made to to be like a murder, but then it turns out there actually is a murder and stuff. And then with the second one, I think it's like the person who's the victim, it's like a switch to identical twin sister thing or whatever, or the companion's revealed to be a completely different identity. And then with this one, it's like a whole scheme to about a diamond and not really actually about murder. What was I gonna say? I don't know. Sorry. It's already like 10:30. I'm a little bit tired. I've been talking about this for an hour. But like out of the characters, I mostly wanted to talk about Judd and LeBlanc, but mostly Judd. And I talked about the murders. I talked about the musical references and stuff. I thought all the performances were pretty good, honestly. It's funny, it's like once again a Knives Out movie where there's like a bunch of big names, except I only recognize maybe like 3 or 4 of them. It is good timing though, because like I'm recording this, I watched it on what is today? Today's the 13th, but today is Saturday. Yeah, and it's funny, it's Saturday and the Josh O'Connor hosted episode of SNL came out like a couple hours ago. Actually, I think it was probably like shown on TV like as I was watching this movie, which I will probably watch that tomorrow. I just kind of get my hopes up when it's like a big movie that comes out and they have the someone from it as like the SNL host, and then I think like, oh, they're gonna do a skit about the movie, and then it's maybe like mentioned like once, and then it's just sketches about other stuff, and I'm like, oh, okay. Actually, if anything, I don't want them to do a sketch about this movie because this movie is so good and I kind of don't want them to make fun of it. If anything, there was a Sesame Street bit with LeBlanc as a puppet on Sesame Street, and I'm still kind of mad he's not voiced by Daniel Craig in that. And I'm gonna accept that as the only it's the only Knives Out parody I'm gonna accept if it's like the Muppets. I hear people talking online too of like that happening, and people are thinking like, is there gonna be a Knives Out movie with Muppets? I hope so. I'll take Muppet movie variants of like anything. I mean, if nothing of that happens, I'll accept the LeBlanc and Sesame Street thing. But I'm down for Daniel Craig interacting with Muppets. That sounds fun. Yeah, I think that's all my thoughts on this. I feel like I can't, like, I'll clarify some things. I really enjoyed it. I was paying attention the whole time, which is actually kind of rare for me with movies these long. And I feel like I understood it as it was happening, but it was kind of like a lot to process. I feel like I said, I need to watch it again, not only to get like a more of a solid opinion, but just I want to catch all the clues now that I know, and you can do that with like any murder mystery movie and stuff. But I'm glad I was at least able to follow along of like, okay, this person murdered this person, and then like once everything was being revealed and that was like the big info dump, I was like following along with that, which is good. I was worried I wasn't going to be able to, and there's of course probably things I got wrong in here or missed. Going off the top of my head, it's like a lot to process through. But yeah, good movie. I'll watch it again at some point. I'm not going to do like a second review of like, okay, now I've seen it multiple times, here's like my opinion of it or something. I know sometimes I do that if I rewatch a movie, and I just like to make like one review for a movie, and it's just like my opinion in terms of that viewing. And I thought, because this is a murder mystery movie and it was also really good, I was going to talk about it no matter what, that it would be good for like my first viewing of it, of like, okay, what are my thoughts, but I'm down for more Knives Out movies. This was great, and I'm glad that at least this one was made, because I would have been kind of sad if like the first one was really good and then Glass Onion, in my opinion, not so much, and that would have been a bummer if it, like, that's where the series had to end. I hope there's not going to be like a bajillion of these or whatever. I feel like it would get kind of tiring. I mean, I do think what carries it as like a series is like, Daniel Craig is LeBlanc. I don't want anyone else's character. It's gonna be so weird if I start watching other stuff or like other things he's not, if he doesn't have that like like American Southern accent and stuff. what was I gonna say? And having different settings and not having any of the movies be connected, I think, is one of the stronger things. And having like a completely different cast every time, so that way they're it's like books. They're like standalone movies and stuff, even though it's all like technically the same series. I think that's like the thing that of like why there's continuously able to be sequels. You don't really treat them as sequels, you just kind of treat them as their own thing, you know. I mean, it'll stop being sequels if they stop having LeBlanc as a character, because he's the only thing like tying them together. And I mean, they are kind of similar in like the way they're done and stuff, but I mean, it follows the same structure of like any kind of murder mystery of like we have to introduce the suspects in every movie. LeBlanc has like an assistant who turns out to be like the, you know, like the actual main character of the movie and like very plot important and stuff. But yeah, I liked the church setting and stuff with this. I feel like there was a lot of like religious like symbolism and stuff in this. That's part of the reason I need to like watch this movie again. There's like a lot of phrases and things they use that I feel like probably went over my head. I don't know. I also really like this poster. I think it's cool where they're all like looking into the grave. And even with the title of like Wake Up Dead Man, now that I've watched the movie, I'm like, okay, I think I can guess why it's called that. Of they have this whole thing of like the Martha's plan of having Josh Brolin's character seem like he's like rising out of the dead, which they do like a switcheroo where it's actually the gravekeeper Samson who's in the casket, so that way he, you know, he's given a drug to make it seem like he's dead, but then he has to get like buried alive or something. Or no, he's not buried alive, he's put in the crypt, I'm sorry. And then he has to come out of the crypt and pop out of there, and everyone's gonna think like, whoa, it's a miracle, the Josh Brolin priest came out back to life or whatever. You know, except that plan goes wrong, but that's probably why it's called like Wake Up Dead Man, because he's not dead and they need him to wake up. I also I feel like I rushed that so hard. I'm sorry. I like the detail that you have the title written normally at like the start of the movie, and then when it ends before the credits, it's like covered in flowers and stuff. The flowers look really pretty, and I'm assuming it's like a thing of maybe to show like, okay, they solved the mystery, or you know how you leave like flowers when someone dies. I don't know. I just thought that was like a cool little detail. But yeah, I like this poster where they're all like looking in the grave and stuff. I just think the design of it's cool. And then having like that sort of negative space of like your POV, you're in the hole and you're dead and they're watching you and stuff. And then that's where they have all the info. This would have been cool for me to see in a theater. I like before it came out, you know, I knew like I was gonna watch it no matter what. It's a Knives Out movie. I mean, you know, I was originally hesitant because of Glass Onion, and then I got more curious because people were saying it's good, and I agree with them on that it's good. I liked it. That's I mean me liking it is not the reason I think it's good, but I thought it was a good movie. I hope it gets some awards. But yeah, now that I've watched it, I think like it would have been cool to see in theaters, not in the way I felt with Frankenstein of like, oh my gosh, this is a visual masterpiece, I need it on the biggest screen possible, but more of like, this is a good enough movie where it would have been worth it for me to go to a movie theater. It would have, not saying like, oh, that it being good made it worth it or whatever, but you know, I would have enjoyed it in a theater. I would have felt like this is cool to like make the effort to go see in like a theater. But I'm fine with watching it on Netflix. I watch it on a TV downstairs with my folks. And I'm assuming a lot of other people see it on Netflix too. I mean, that is something that bothers me with streaming. I'll just say this really quick of like, there's some movies. I mean, this one I'm glad got to be in theaters, got a theatrical release, but there's a lot of movies that just kind of nowadays they end up immediately put on streaming and they don't ever get to be in a theater, and it's a bummer. Because I feel that helps with like being able to like talk about the movie, and it's like a very different experience seeing something in theaters. Like I really wish I could have seen Frankenstein, but that was given that limited theater release where it wasn't near me like anywhere, and it was going to be like a whole outing with a friend. But I did get to see Wicked Part 2, and that was great to see in a theater, and just having the sound around me and seeing it on a big screen, it's like a whole different experience, so I miss that. I know that means I should probably make the effort of like, I'm saying this of like, go see these movies in theaters, Bumble, because I know I'm like part of the problem with that too. Sorry, I'm not trying to get in like a whole movie theater rant here. I don't know, I was just kind of thinking about that, looking at the poster of like in theaters on this day, and then it gets put on Netflix like a couple weeks later and stuff. But yeah, this is one of the movies that I don't have an issue with because it was like in theaters before the Netflix stuff. It would have been kind of sad if it was just like put on Netflix because this movie's so good. Nothing against Netflix on that, just it would have been cool to have the theater experience. It deserved it, and it did, and I'm glad, and I'm gonna stop talking now. But yeah, I thought it was good. I recommend it. I hope there's more of these. If there's not, I'm okay with that. I hope it gets some awards. I hope specifically Josh O'Connor. I think he's the guy that plays Judd. I think he did a really good job. I don't think I've seen him in anything. Now I'm kind of curious. So yeah, all right, that's gonna be it. I don't know if this is gonna be the last video of 2025 in terms of like me recording or anything. I've been watching SNL the past 2 years. I'm just mentioning this because I was thinking about that episode I need to watch, and I've caught up to where like the modern one is now. Like the current season. I don't know if I want to make a video talking about the show. I don't have like notes or anything, but I watched so much of it. I feel like that would be kind of cool. I'm debating it. I still have an entire month to I have until the year ends to decide, but I'm kind of curious if you guys would be interested in that or if it would just be me blabbing about whatever. All right, bye-bye.